Hello, gay men, and welcome to another episode of Coming Inside Out. I am your host, Brian James, along with my co-host, Mark Dembo. Mark, good to see
Hey,
you, buddy.
Brian. You too, as always. How's it going, my friend?
Good. Before the episode, Mark and I were celebrating. Before Mark and I hit the record button, we were talking about our last episode with Dr. Evan Goldstein and how that episode really kind of blew up on social media for us. So thank you for bringing him to the show,
I'm so
Mark.
happy that we were able to have Dr. Goldstein on, and what great response we had from our listeners and new listeners, and clearly it's a topic that I guess hit a nerve with a lot of people. And you know what's interesting, Brian, is I was looking at, and we'll share some of the comments and notes that we got from viewers and listeners. Just a wide range of people that wrote in, men, women, gay,
Yes.
straight, just, clearly
Older,
absolutely.
younger.
And it was, and I think it was a lot of fun talking to Evan, and very informative, on so many fronts. Maybe we'll have to bring him back for
the butt doctor,
for a part two.
The butt doctor with the putty mouth. That's what one of the people wrote
looking
in.
at some of the comments here, one of my favorite ones was one of our listeners commented, "I had no idea people do such things." Because neither did I until we had him on. I had no idea of.
Me neither. I always thought that was an exit. I never thought it was an entrance. So yeah, we had some like women in their 50s and 60s write in. We had a couple lesbians write in. We had people ask questions. This is specific to the butt, but asking about the vagina too, which we couldn't. I'm going to scratch that part out. We'll move forward. I don't want to go down that hole.
All right, Brian, I think that blooper stays in. I think that stays in. Oh yeah.
Oh, Mark. Oh, yes. Oh, well, so many people wrote in. I'll read one of them. It says, "My partner doesn't douche at all, and it's been the most pleasurable sex we've ever had. He feels so good because douching makes him feel irritated."
Come on, read the rest of the...
I'm having brain fog today.
So
all right. He feels so good because douching makes him feel irritated.
Fuck what?
So I said, fuck it. We'll work around it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And for any of our listeners, if you haven't listened to the episode, certainly encourage you to go back and listen to it. But, I think one of the things that I know just from conversations I've had with some of my friends who have listened to the episode, and some of the comments we got was that whole concept about, I think as gay men, one of the early things you learn, no matter when you come out, if you're going to have anal sex, it's douching, right? You got to clean out. And he really said, most people overdo it. And, not to forget that there can be dangers to that, right? It's not necessarily the healthiest thing, and messes with your microbiome and good bacteria and all things that keep you functioning properly. So I think that's a really key takeaway. And
I learned a lot in that episode, and so many people wrote in saying thank you for having this conversation, because it was so valuable for them because they haven't heard it anywhere else. And he was really very specific and talked about over-douching, talked about hair removal, talked about
and again, also talking about just some of the different graphics. One of our listeners commented, as a bi woman, who has pelvic pain issues and loves butt stuff. Thank you for bringing up pelvic PT multiple times. It has been a game changer for my issues. The only thing I would add, that if someone is looking for a toy, a step up from dilators that could simulate the real thing, they should check out dual density silicone. Standard pores are way too hard and abrasive. That soft plush layer really makes a difference. I guess so, right? So dual density
Oh,
silicone.
all
I
right.
wasn't familiar with
Look kind
that,
of
but
like
I
satin
guess it's
sheets, I guess, huh?
sounds like it would have like an outer, softer layer that might be able to insert more easily than just something that's, again, kind of that harder silicone. And I guess maybe would feel more like a real thing than something that's just a hard silicone dilator
Yes.
or dildo.
Yes. Yes. What a lot of people wrote in, they hadn't heard of Botoxing your butt before. I hadn't really either. So that was fun to get that information as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I
Yeah,
would do hair
absolutely.
removal or
Absolutely.
Botox, but never say never. Well, I think this is a good time to bring up to the audience, ask us anything. Uh, Mark and I encourage you to write in, ask us any questions. We'll read them in one of our podcasts. We get a lot of people write in with responses to things they've heard on the
Yes,
podcast.
indeed. And
So
you can
write
reach
in if
us
you
at
have something you'd like us to talk
cominginsideout
about,
at
and we'll be happy to bring it up
gmail.com
on the show.
is the direct email to us. So, yeah, we've had a lot of fun answering a lot of those questions. Some have been more serious, some a little bit lighter, but we want to continue to focus on things that people are asking about, interested in, or at least want to hear some perspective on it, right?
Yes. Yeah, because so many people write in telling us they thought they were the only ones, they were all alone, they didn't know. And this is a great place for people to just log into the show and get a bunch of information.
So
thank you again, listeners, for listening and also for writing in. And we have a great new segment which has gotten really popular with our listeners, and it's Letters from the Closet. And almost, I don't know, every day we're getting letters from our listeners. I was going to read one of them. I condensed it. It was a long email, but it had some great stuff in here, and I think that it will resonate with some of our listeners. And this gentleman wrote in that he's a 50-year-old man. He was raised in
evangelical.
church, evangelical. He was raised in the evangelical church, was put into a form of conversion therapy at the age of 7. Wow. And what breaks my heart is he wrote in and said that he was sexually abused by the male church leaders from age 4 to 12. He married his wife at 26. He came out to himself at 38, and he came out to his wife at 47. They had a sexless marriage for 14 years. He's now divorced and out to friends and family. I'm fucking this up. I'm having a hard time today. I need to calm down for a second. I need to take a breath. All right. He's now divorced and out to friends and family. And he has a question. How do men who were molested and assaulted by other men coming out later in life have sexual relations?
Yeah. Wow.
How do you begin a whole new life?
First
at
of all,
this
thank
point?
you
And he
for
asks,
writing
can
in
you?
with that and
It's
sharing that, because
huge.
that's a pretty vulnerable place to be, and to be able to share that is huge. And look, obviously, neither one of us are experts or qualified to really tackle that. I think my first response is, look, clearly finding the right kind of help in therapy and not conversion therapy, certainly, but somebody that you can really, really talk to about that experience. I think, if I were to look at this, how do you begin a whole new
Yes.
life at this point? And that's where you've got to begin where you are, right? And if I would say anything, it's look, don't you can't judge where you are in your journey based on your past, the previous things that have happened to you, by comparing to where somebody else is. And just to be where you are right now, to be able to say, hey, I am now out, I recognize this is who I
Yes.
am. That's huge. And that's you say, how do you begin a whole new life at this point? You are beginning that new life, even though it's right, may not seem like there's a lot of progress. But yeah, I mean, I think a big part of that is, how do you unravel that trauma and be able to move on? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And how, in a very healthy way, how do you heal
Yeah.
from this, which will then kind of be the catalyst into you moving into this new life? It's hard to be in a new life when you haven't healed from your past. You don't want to bring that with you. You kind of, it's always going to be part of your story, but you kind of want to heal from
Mm-hmm.
that so that you can create a
Yeah.
healthier,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
you
But
know,
again, thank you
new
for writing
life.
in.
Find a
And,
partner. So, yes.
certainly as we continue to say, hey, how do we provide more resources, more guidance, that this probably could be a great topic, because if you think about so many men coming out later in life, I mean, this is a pretty, I think, explicit example of somebody who clearly had some sexual assault when they were younger. um, but not a day goes by when I don't hear from somebody that went through conversion therapy or had some kind of trauma, bullying, um, all kinds of things, and to be able to maybe address some of that and give people some tips. We'd love to be able to do that. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Or have a specialist on. I
Yeah.
mean, we've had a couple
Yes, indeed.
great
Yes,
guests
indeed.
on, but,
Um,
obviously get another
So
guest on that
another
can address this
listener wrote
also.
in saying, I recently found your podcast trying to make sense of my own journey as a man coming out later in life. Married, a dad, still in the middle of navigating some very big conversations in my life. And I'm sure that describes many of our listeners. I know it does. One of the hardest parts of this process has been feeling like I don't have other gay men or friends to talk about what I'm going through. I live in an area where there really aren't any local LGBTQ groups, community spaces, or bars where I could meet others going through something similar. And the listener goes on to say that for the first time listening to our podcast, uh, he's been able to hear other men talk openly about their fears, guilt, family, marriage, and coming out later in life. So thank you for writing in, and I'm glad that this is providing that space. But yeah, again, similarly, we hear from so many people that may live in small communities where there aren't the resources. But and Brian, I'd love your perspective on this too. I think even in large cities, I mean, look, I'm in the New
Yes.
York area, you're in the LA area. It can still be hard to find the right connections
Right.
to, is it a group, is it a community space? I think that's a common thread, especially when we come out later in
Yes.
life, right? It's where do I fit in? And we've talked about some of this before.
Yes. Yes. This is just for myself. I lived about 45 minutes outside of downtown Los Angeles. When I first came out, I drove about an hour and 20 minutes from my house. I found a group in Facebook, and it was Gay Fathers of Los Angeles, and they were hosting an event in Manhattan Beach at one of the founders' houses. I drove there very nervous. I thought, I'm going to get there. Everybody's going to be naked, or, it's going to be a sex party. So I drove there. My mind was scattered. I've shared this before. I parked my car somewhere where I wasn't allowed to park it. I misread the sign. And when I went in to this meeting, which was about 2 hours, and these are the most authentic, genuine men. There were four of us. I'm still friendly with them today, but I was so worried. I illegally parked my car. I came out, my car was towed. Yes. I come out from the thing and my car was gone. But, just being able to share with these people, the four of us were all relatively new, coming out, all gay fathers. And just to share with this group of men, it wasn't sexual. It was about, hiding and, who I knew I was versus who I allowed myself to be. It was very freeing. I first learned to come out and find my tribe was through that. Some people, jump on Grindr, they jump on Scruff, they jump on dating apps, and they're looking for hookups, they're looking for something other. I was looking to connect with other men that had walked in my shoes. So that's how, and it wasn't easy. Like,
absolutely.
again,
and
I'm
I think
driving an hour and change to go find this group, even though I lived in the LA area.
Sure, as you said, you can go on the apps, sure, and it's not necessarily either or. It's, hey, you can go and look for that hookup, but even if you're in a smaller community, that those options may be somewhat limited as well. But I think so many of us learn early on, once you kind of start that coming out process, it's looking for more than just that hookup, recognizing who I am as a gay person is more than just the hookup. It's more than just the sex. It's wanting that connection, of wanting to build that community of people where,
yes.
And I think this is key for so many too. It's not just, oh, I want to connect with other gay people. And sure, but other gay men, and I'll say men because predominantly I know, we are talking to other men, but it could be other gay people that have been in a similar situation, that you have buried a key part of you for so much of your life. You've been married in a heterosexual relationship. You have kids. There's that common ground that being able to make that connection and finding that community can be so key. And listen, that's why I'm so thrilled to do the work that we're doing here and help make some of those connections. And for those of you listening, right, follow us on Instagram, follow us on TikTok, follow us on Facebook. We even have a LinkedIn page with a few people on it, because there's community there. There's groups like Gay Fathers Worldwide, which we talk about extensively here. That's how Brian and I first met, was through that group. There's groups like HOW, Husbands Out to Wives. And even if you're in a small community, that is where there are those options. Yep, it's not that in-person connection, or it may not be as easy, but these are large-ish online groups where you might find somebody an hour, 2 hours away from you, or at the very least, you can make those virtual connections and start to build some of that community.
Yes. And I'm going to add to this, because if people go onto the internet, and let's just use Facebook as an example, you and I have both befriended people on Facebook. We've had conversations. People message me on Facebook. If you don't want to pick up your phone and have your phone number exposed,
that's right. Yep.
Through Messenger, you can actually use that as a phone. You can actually have a phone conversation with somebody through Messenger. So if you're worried about, who this other person is, or you're unsure, hey, on Messenger, if you're chatting with them already, you can make a phone call through there and have, a conversation with somebody. They don't have to be in your backyard. Although, yes, you would like, to sit down and talk to this person.
Yep.
Sometimes,
and that kind
having
of
a phone conversation,
on
maybe
one
your
of the topics,
only
Brian,
option.
that you and I have been talking offline about, and that's the whole idea of how do you protect yourself, online when you're on the apps or sharing information. And actually, I'm really excited because we'll more details coming soon, but we're going to be bringing a guest on in a few weeks to talk about exactly this topic of how do you protect yourself online? What do you need to be careful of? But by and large, I think you have to be, look, you do want to be cautious because especially if you're in the early stages or you may not be completely out, right? What gets out there? You need to be mindful of what you're putting out there and knowing that there
Yes.
are ways to do that, right? Like you said, through Messenger, without having to give out your contact information.
Yes. Yes. And what I'm
Yep.
referring to is having a phone conversation with somebody, being vulnerable with somebody, with your emotions. I know that in our community, people like to share
Yes.
photos and a lot more than their emotions. So, what I was talking about as far as like beware of and dealing with people that are maybe trying to blackmail you or use your information against you,
Mm-hmm.
having an emotional
Absolutely.
conversation
We'll
is one
we'll
thing.
we'll as
Having a
that we'll be
photo
diving into
out
more
there
of
with your
more of
face and your dick
that
in it, that's a
in
different
in
topic.
an episode coming up in a few weeks. So yes, more to come on that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
looking back at the show notes, we've had people write in talking to us about being blackmailed. They've shared photos. These people have found out who
Yep.
their family members are. They're going to reach
Yep.
out to them. They're going to reach out to their employers. They're going to reach out to somebody in their church if they don't give them money.
Right.
All right, you give them money, they still have all of these photos and everything. It's like, how do you know they're deleting them? When is this going to end? And we've had people that have had to come out within a matter of hours. They were told that they're going to contact family members or employers if they don't give them the money. And these people have to like sit their family down within a
Yeah.
few short
Yeah.
hours and come out to them. And maybe, a couple of people I've talked to, their intent was to never come out. Their intent was
Yeah.
to be
Yep.
closeted as far as
Mm-hmm.
they
Yes,
knew
indeed.
the rest of their lives. And they were outed. Wow. Yeah. What
That's
else do we
right.
want to talk about? I have
um,
positive. I was in a much better
so
mindset
just
yesterday. My
another
mind is kind of
topics.
splintered
Here we
today.
are. It's the middle of
Um,
May, and some areas are already starting Pride celebrations. Official Pride Month is coming up in June. And it's interesting, and we were talking a little bit about this before
yes.
we hit the record button. Well, we were talking about the cancellation of the Pride Festival in Long Beach, California, which it's uh we
Yes.
haven't
Long
talked
Beach,
about the
California.
political scene in a while. But this is just showing how the
Ugh.
impact of what's happening. It's I guess maybe in some ways, I don't know, a symbolic showing of what's happening. Now I know the reasons for the cancellation of the Long Beach Pride. I think some of it was financial. I saw something too. It had to do with permits not being filed properly. Um, but I think it's just still telling of the current environment we're in. And um, I was thinking about this the other day with Pride coming up. Like, wow, it's exciting. Uh,
Yes.
Looking forward to Pride here in New York. But then there's still kind of this pallor to it this year.
Yes. We have kind of stayed away from political
Yeah.
topics. You and I talk about them offline, and we've addressed them a few times on the podcast, but that
Yeah.
occupies a
Yeah.
chunk of my mind, as you and I have discussed, and it's hard. It's you don't want to say too much, but you don't want to be
Well,
blind to what's
yeah, and
happening.
we've look, we've said this before.
Oof, it's
On the
really
one hand, you
hard.
don't want to say
It's
too much.
and
On the other
within
hand, we can't stay silent either. Um, and to stay silent is, in many ways, in my mind, that is a an acquiescence of what's happening. Because I don't, you don't want to rock the boat. You don't want, oh, they're good people. I, mm, I, I just still cannot wrap my head around anybody that is part of this community that can support the
Mm.
actions of what is happening. When you look at things like Pride getting canceled, when you look at the attempts to get the Supreme Court to
Yes.
revisit the issue of gay marriage, um, I just don't understand. This has nothing to do with being able to have political differences if you're conservative or progressive on things like that. Yes, absolutely. You can be conservative. Look, I've been open about it. Hey, I consider myself, I'm a fairly progressive liberal. Okay? Yes. That doesn't mean I'm not opposed to having conversations and being able to engage in meaningful debate on whether it's even if it's immigration or taxation policy or economic policy, what have you. But how do you support an administration, a government that actively is against you? That I just don't understand.
Yes. Just a couple months ago, they took down at Stonewall. They took down the flags. I mean, it's like, you're not under attack. You're not under attack.
Right.
They're painting
Right.
over the
Yeah.
crosswalks, the rainbow
I
crosswalks.
don't
How
understand
can
it.
you
I
not
don't
feel like you're
understand it.
under attack when
And I know
they're
we have some
constantly
listeners
trying to
that
erase
disagree with me
us?
and you politically, and but I would like to understand from that perspective
Yeah, we've had that
how
right
you
in.
can support.
Yes, they write in.
And I mean that sincerely. I would educate me. What am I missing here? Because to me, this is
Yes.
not even a debatable issue. And don't tell me that Trump has gay people in his cabinet. Don't point to Scott Bessent, who is one of the. I won't even go down that road. I, that is not. He's acting
Yeah.
against his own. He's acting in his economic best interests, not his interests as who he is as part of the LGBTQ community. So that bears zero weight.
Yes.
Yes. But with that said, here
I
we are, the
agree.
middle of May. The
Mm.
weather's warming up, at least here in the Northeast, finally. We've got Pride amongst us. And I will say, I think it's more important than ever that we get out there, right? Pride started as a protest. It's turned into this big commercial thing over the years. Okay, yep, here's the time when we see corporate sponsors pulling back because they're afraid of that ass hat in the White House. The cowardice from the corporate world is just mind blowing. But with that said, it is incumbent on all of us to be out there more than ever and stand up for who we are, especially, I'd say especially for those of us coming out later, everybody that's a part of this
Yes.
community. If we can't stand united and be out there, then we're only going to continue to see the attempts to erase this community continue.
Yes. And along with Long Beach Pride, we have LA Pride coming up. Then we have WeHo Pride coming up. We have Dodger Pride Night. We
Yeah,
have something called Out on the Mountain, which is sponsored
absolutely.
by Six
Yeah.
Flags Magic Mountain. Sort of a bunch of
Yes,
things coming
indeed.
up in the next month. So celebrate ourselves, celebrate who we are, celebrate what we stand for, and not just who we are today, but also
That's
fighting
right.
for the
Exactly.
people that are going to be coming out
That's it.
5, 10, 20, 30 years
Right.
from now.
Exactly.
It's not
Yes,
just
indeed.
about kids, it's for our grandkids. So, Mark, as this podcast grows, and if people are looking for us, you can find us on Substack, on Instagram, on Facebook. We're big on TikTok, iHeartRadio. I think we're
The
pretty easy to
handle to
find
look
at this
for,
point.
and as I said, on as for the podcast itself, pretty much on any podcast app that's out there, you're likely to find us. So,
Yes. And we're making this a shorter episode this week. We got some good stuff coming down the pipeline. So we just want to thank everybody who likes us, who follows us, who subscribes to our pages. We appreciate our audience so much. Continue to write in with your questions. Write in with your responses to some of the
yeah.
stuff that you've
And,
heard
and for
from,
those of you that are newer to
some of the
finding
people
us,
that
I'll just
write
add too.
in. We're
You
happy
know,
to share
go
responses with
back to some
them.
of our earlier
Also,
episodes, not only to hear Brian and my banter, but we've had some great guests on. Dr. Joe Court. We had Alan Marion, the gay sex coach, in a 2-part series. Rick Clemens. So there's a lot of great stuff. Go back and listen to some of those other episodes, and we're glad that you're here with us now. All right. Enjoy the rest of the day, Brian. Talk to you soon. Okay.
yeah. Thank
Bye.
you so much. All right, Mark. You too.